Hi, this is Brandy Marks, Vancouver, Washington. I'm a biblical and licensed mental health counselor. Last week I spoke about boundaries and rules for life and what's the point. This week we're going to expand on that a little bit more, biblical guidelines according to the one true God. Because as I noticed online not long ago, well, probably back in 7 years ago, in 2007, research showed that nearly 89% of all Americans believed in God or a higher power, excuse me, universal consciousness. That figure has dropped somewhat over the years. Still, and that's why these teachings are so important. So people understand that God's not asking the impossible from us. He understands and He's got a plan for it. So anyway, let's look at the one true God. We're going to start off with that. Christians, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and love the Lord your God, Jesus said, with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's in the book of Mark. Now, Israel and Judaism, they, in Judaic faith, in the synagogue, you go in there, and almost every service will begin with, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." Well, actually, the Lord our God is one God. That's from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. And the most basic teaching of Islam is a belief in the oneness of God as the only creator, preserver, nourisher, and so forth. There's a nice little talk this one guy gives on www.whyislam.org. I kept it simple here because I didn't want to spend all day on this video. I like to keep them short and sweet. This most basic of all faith affirmations, whether you're Christian, Jewish, or Islamic, is pretty much the same. And it makes a huge difference in your life if you believe or if you don't believe. If one does not believe, then you may as well say to no God, no laws, which pretty much is what they're saying. And hey, we can do whatever we want. I can live life as I please. It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it does matter. Well, ask yourself, what's wrong with this point of view? If we lived in a world where, as I said in my video last week, if you were watching a football game, soccer game, hockey, basketball, I don't care what it is, and the players are out there on the court doing whatever they pleased, running whichever direction and calling it a score, a touchdown, or whatever, that would be absolute, utter chaos. It would make no sense whatsoever. Why do we think life is any different? Why should we not have some kind of rules or guidelines, some kind of boundaries for managing our life well that are fairly consistent so we can pretty much guarantee the guy living next door is going to be following the same rules that we are? Well, that's the problem with humankind. When we start making up our own rules, everybody's got a different opinion. And that's why we have all these lawyers and legal systems, and, well, you know what they're all about. It's absolute nonsense, and a lot of them are not very honest. Okay, so let's look at the law of God and its consistency and what it's there for to teach us. The first 5 books of our Bible in the Judaic faith are the Torah. God, in this book, gave Israel a total way of life to live. And of course, the 10 Commandments are part of the Torah. This law includes all the instructions God gave them to guide the nation Israel, including ceremonial, ritual instructions, as well as civil and moral guidelines. In Exodus 20, God gave laws by which to govern our lives in a well-disciplined manner to reduce sin, sickness, and disease. Exodus 39, the building of temples was very specific, exacting dimensions. Well, consider our grand buildings today. The Eiffel Tower, the World Trade Center when it was still standing. Anyway, I can't even think of some of the names. I have a mental blank there, but you probably have your own picture in your head of some pretty phenomenal architectural buildings out there that are built to exact dimensions. Now consider those as opposed to the tent cities where all the nomads or homeless people of our world are living nowadays, in undisciplined lives, building buildings that are unstructured, unstable, and run down. They're terrible. So you can kind of see why God had specific directions for building buildings, governing our lives. He also gave instructions to those who led the people and who obeyed him, and how they were to dress with garments of a peculiar nature. And you think, well, why would God care how we dress? Nowadays, you look at preachers in t-shirts and blue jeans, and some pretty tacky looking blue jeans at that for the most part. But this style of dress back then for the priests and the elders and those who led the people, they were given so they reflected God's glory and how God esteemed those who wore those garments. I don't dress up fancy on the rare occasion when I do go to church, but I always love going to some of the Black Baptist churches and others where these ladies come in with their gorgeous outfits on, their black, colorful hats, and all kinds of different, they're just absolutely amazing. These women know how to dress to the hilt. And it's not just in black churches, but in a lot of white churches in the Christian community, you see an awful lot of blue jeans and t-shirts, and occasionally people will come in dressed up to the hilt for church, but it doesn't always happen. So there was a reason for that. Anyway, now in the book of Leviticus, God told people how to deal with sickness and disease, especially leprosy, but other types of injury and disease as well. God instructs on nudity and allowing people privacy by not uncovering their nakedness. Oh my gosh, look at our culture nowadays. Young girls running around looking like prostitutes. Their skirts are up, they bend over, you can see their tush from the back. Hopefully they're wearing underwear at least. And their mini skirts, their low-cut blouses, and it's outrageous outfits. For my way of thinking, it's appalling. On the other hand, I have to admit, when I was young, if I was that hot looking when I was little, and I was pretty good looking when I was young, I probably would have worn stuff like that too. It was a way to get attention and acknowledgement. But is that really the way we want our children, our young girls and boys, with their pants down around their butts and you can see the crack? Is this really the way they need to get attention? This is why it's so important to teach them the right way to dress, so they esteem their bodies, who they are, and feel good about themselves, and not thinking they have to be praised or affirmed by other people for these outrageous styles of dress. But then that's my opinion. Okay. Another issue of the nudity, to uncover the nakedness of another family member, was considered incest. And sharing your wife with another is adultery. And having sex with an animal is foul. Okay. While in Deuteronomy, God gave us the 10 Commandments, later on in Leviticus chapter 19, he's more explicit in defining those commandments and what to do and not to do. He doesn't really say why, but if you take a look at it and imagine a culture that doesn't and what it would be like, you can understand why it's so important to follow some of these regulations. Some more commands, he says, is don't bear a grudge. If you're angry with someone, go and tell them their offense against you, so you're not holding on to the sin yourself. The other guy usually doesn't care that you're mad at them. It's not hurting them. Unfortunately, holding on to anger, bitterness, and resentment, and I'll be doing a teaching from a book I wrote later on about forgiveness that talks about the mental, emotional, physical health problems that occur when we refuse to forgive and continue to hang on to that bitterness, resentment, and hostility. Okay, so don't bear a grudge. If you're angry with someone, go tell them about it and ask their forgiveness. If they don't forgive, that's on them, but at least you did your part. It's the entire Old Testament is all about forgiveness. And really, so was a lot of what Jesus taught in the New Testament, all about forgiveness. So love your neighbor as yourself. We think of this as New Testament, but it's very much in Leviticus chapter 19. And verse 33 says, if a stranger lives with you in your land, do not molest. In other words, don't assault, pester, abuse him. You must count him as one of your own and love him as yourself, for you were once a stranger. if you had to flee this country for whatever reason, say life got just unbearable here, and you had to flee to England, would you really want to be treated the way that we treat some of the foreign people that come into our country here? I'm just saying, it's not right. Okay. For chapter 19:35 in Leviticus, it says, in legal verdicts, your measures, length, weight, capacity, be just with them. Jesus said in Luke chapter 6:37, don't judge others, and God will not judge you. That'd be kind of cool on Judgment Day when you're standing before the throne and God says, let's see, you were judging so-and-so. Is there any place in your life you did that? But wouldn't it be nice to stand there and God say, well, I don't really see anything written down for you here. Welcome home, good and faithful servant. Oh, I think that's so marvelous. Jesus also said, don't condemn others, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. That alone should have you scrabbling to write down your list of people you need to forgive so you clear the deck. And when you stand before God, there's not going to be one bloody thing there holding you back from eternity in heaven. Yahoo! Okay, anyway, verse 38. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. For with the same measure you use, it will be given back to you, or measured back to you, whichever version you read. That's pretty amazing. That should make you eager little givers out there, so somewhere along the line God's going to be giving it back to you. In Exodus, the law is used in a narrow sense. A narrower sense in the strict religious ways that has been handed down over the centuries through the Pharisees. It's a standard we're to live by, not legalistically, ritually follow. In this sense, it was never intended as a permanent feature of life. Legalistic, religious, you got to do this, bam, bam, bam. No, the righteousness expressed in the law is to be living expression in the life of those who walk with God. The question we must answer is, do our actions, our attitude, our behavior, our communication, is what we think, say, and do we express a love of God and a love of other people? That's a real question. Well, I hope this was helpful. God bless, and I'll see you next time.